This is the Illuminate podcast, a Sandy Boy production. Each week on the Illuminate podcast, the hosts will bring you insightful conversations and stories of people who are illuminating their own lives through their business, work, community, family, and world.
Hi friends, welcome to the Illuminate podcast. This is your host, Kristin Struer. You are listening to episode 65. And today we have an episode that is absolutely perfect for this Thanksgiving week. Some heroes wear capes, but today's guest on the show is a quiet local hero who has used her role as an educator and community leader to serve others. Most recently, she has been working tirelessly behind the scenes, serving an immigrant population on the eastern shore of Maryland as they face the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's guest is an amazing woman, Amanda Ensor, a 17-year educator who has used the power of education and the connection of schools to improve the well-being of and empower families within her community. This episode is full of inspiration and is a great reminder about the power of education. Amanda talks about how living overseas inspired her to go into teaching. We discuss how schools serve as a lifeline for many families and the impact that COVID-19 is having on that lifeline. She humbly shares about the work she has been facilitating during the pandemic, which includes food and supply drives and keeping families supported and connected. You will learn also about some great children's literature. Amanda's wisdom, compassion, and leadership will leave you feeling that the future is bright because of heroes like her supporting the community and teaching our youth. Enjoy my conversation with Amanda. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to the Illuminate podcast.
Hi, Kristin. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. I feel like we should maybe start by telling the listeners how we know each other. We go way back to Amanda's the older sister of my best childhood friend, Maggie, and so has served as kind of an older sister for me. And so I've known you for almost my whole life, since elementary school at least.
Yep. And Kristin's always been the other little sister, the one that came on family vacations and all our big family events she's been a part of. So absolutely. And, she got a lot of little sister treatment too, as we were growing up as well. So yes, I actually don't remember a time without Kristin in our life.
I know. It is fun to think about all the summers. I mean, when I think about what did you do every summer? It was like, oh, I went with the Rhodes family to the beach. That was what I did every summer.
Yep. And it's so fun now to have the next generation of, with my girls and your boys, and they get to have the same experiences that were so memorable to us as kids.
I know. I love that. And especially when the world is right again and everybody can be together at the beach.
Yes. That does make everything better for sure.
So Amanda, one of the reasons I want to talk to you is because one, your job right now is very relevant. You are in the school system, in the administration, and you really started your career as a teacher. Tell me about why you chose to be a teacher.
Okay, sure. Yeah, this is my 17th year in education. I spent the first 15 years in the classroom, most recently the fourth grade classroom. So I can't believe I'm already a 17-year educator. How did I get this old? So I am one of those women who, grew up wanting to be a teacher. And was always loved playing the teacher role when we played, make believe as we were little, those kinds of things. But the real sort of changing factor in my life that really sort of made it stick was growing up overseas. My dad was in the Foreign Service, and so I spent almost my entire youth living in third world countries. And one of the things that he did with the U.S. Agency for International Development was a lot of projects in education. And so I have very vivid memories of visiting some of his projects, especially in high school. I did all 4 years of high school in Guatemala, and he would take us out into the field, into some of his field projects up in the northern region of the country. And I have very vivid memories of what schools were like there. And I remember thinking to myself of what a priority they made education, but how much they had to struggle to have those experiences. And so I really wanted to, when I came back to the US, it was a little bit of culture shock. And I also very quickly learned through my student teaching and so forth that education didn't have the same value here. And so it was a big eye opener for me to want to be part of that and to change that mindset. I don't want to say to help us understand how lucky we are, but just to really change the view of what education can do for you, your future, the opportunity that it truly provides. I know it's sort of cliche to say that, but we take it for granted sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so I got to see that firsthand growing up as to how lucky children really are in this country. And so that was kind of the tipping point for me to really get involved in public education.
I love that. Now, before you were in Guatemala, where else did you live?
We lived in Haiti, Morocco, Nepal. And then after Guatemala, my family moved to South Africa. And they were in South Africa when I was in college, but that made South Africa home for those 4 years that I was in college. And going back there over Christmas breaks, and the deeper I got into my education major at school, I spent even more time with my dad visiting his projects in the surrounding rural townships in South Africa.
Wow, that's awesome. Are there any specific memories or things that you just won't forget that you saw in either in Guatemala or in South Africa?
In regards to teaching, or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, just what you were exposed to within the education systems that were there that were just so surprising.
So I think that honestly, what really sticks out most is the smiles and the faces, the genuine love and just absolute excitement for being in school. When we visited these areas and having somebody make these opportunities available, I will never forget. I mean, most of the kids I would have loved to have just taken home with me. They were beautiful, just beautiful people inside and out, and just so grateful. I really truly can picture their faces with these big white teeth and just grinning at us. So excited to have us come see what they were working on. It's just a very different feel. The excitement was just something I will never forget.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that there's that different feeling when you're in some of those, rural, underdeveloped communities around education than it is in the U.S.?
I truly think it's something we take for granted. And actually, this will all sort of come full circle in a little bit as we get into the work that I'm doing now. But because what I'm realizing is that even here on American soil, working with the migrant population that I work with now, I see those same smiles and that same excitement for the opportunities that we provide those families in our schools. I think it is I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I'm still searching for that real reason. But there is a lot of value in education and what opportunities it brings you. I think a lot of times we don't know a world of not being able to go to school. Mm-hmm. In fact, some of us, we view school as just another thing we have to get up and do. Can't wait till I graduate, check off that box. I'm done. I got my diploma. It's just sort of a day-to-day rut routine of what we do, right? Because it's available to everyone. Yeah. And in so many of these countries, and then those families who come to the U.S. and have that available to them, it's an opportunity. It's a completely different mindset, as this is something, especially for parents who bring their children here, who may have never, gotten more than 2 or 3 years of education in their home country. It is so valuable to them because they want their children to be able to learn everything they possibly can, because they want to see that opportunity for them as they grow to be adults.
Yeah. It is really powerful to think about. And certainly now that I have 2 young boys, and my husband's work is also in education and schools in Uganda. And so how do we instill that excitement and opportunity in a place where it is something that they will just do every day, because that's what they're so fortunate to be able to do every day?
And I think that's really, we've really realized also, and this is one thing that the COVID pandemic has brought into light, is the school is a lifeline, right? And it's a lifeline for families of all demographics. It's a lifeline, for children of all ages. And I think I keep hoping, I should say, that when we come out of this on the other side and we adjust to whatever our new normal is going to be, hopefully that value of what happens during the day at school is reinstilled, and we start to remember again how maybe tough it was without having that access and connection to our schools in the same capacity as we did before the pandemic. I keep hoping that that's going to be something that comes out on the other end of all this, because, parents and families are truly realizing the work that goes on at school beyond just academic growth, the social emotional, it's a whole child picture of all the things that happen in a school building, right? In that public education system. And so we've never been so closely connected in a sense with our families, because they have to be involved. They don't have a choice right now with all these virtual learning programs taking place. So, looking for silver lining in things, I do think, and I have, you hear people say, man, I never knew a teacher's job was so hard, or gosh, teachers do a lot during the day, or man, they put up with a lot. All these things that I think they lost sight of, because what did you do every day? You just got up and you went to school, and you came home and you did it again the next day. So I'm hoping that, despite all this uncertainty and as hard as this has been in so many aspects, that one of the things is that when these kids get back in school, that excitement will be there too. They're going to be so glad to be back in that setting, realize how important those routines are, realize why teachers hold the expectations that they do, and maybe move forward on the right foot. So we'll see. It's just a hope.
Oh, that's such a good hope, and a good way to, a silver lining perhaps in all of this, and that hunger exists within our school system. I mean, I've certainly seen it with friends of mine whose kids were virtual and then they've gone back to in-person, just seeing the excitement of the parents and the kids that are going back in person. Obviously now a lot of people are moving back to virtual, but I think I have seen the appreciation and the hunger existing in that kind of short blip, but hopefully when the new normal arrives, that will exist here.
I hope so too. I really do.
Okay. So you were a teacher for how many years of your 15 years in education?
So it's 15 years a teacher in the classroom.
15 years
out of the classroom. Yep. And I've been out of the classroom for 2 years.
Okay. And so what grades did you teach?
I taught 5th, 2nd, and then finished my career with 10 years in 4th grade, which was my absolute favorite grade level.
I actually have really vivid memories of 4th grade. I had Mrs. Pleasant at St. Anne's.
Yes.
And we grew chicks, and it was like the colonial years. I mean, I really actually remember 4th grade.
I mean, in teaching the other grade levels, 5th was not for me. It was, like teaching seniors in high school, because they're the top of the elementary school, but in a much more immature manner. And I liked 2nd grade, but what I really missed from 2nd grade was just sort of classroom discussions. And we could have real courageous conversations and classroom discussions that went on for extended period of time. So that's one of the reasons, was I did a lot of shoe tying, a lot of here's go get a Kleenex, a lot of that kind of things in 2nd grade. I mean, they were just, they were at the end of learning to read, right? And then they say the switch takes place in third grade, and that's when you start to read to learn. And I think that's where I really felt I was most comfortable, when I could expose my students to all kinds of things, and then they were really having the opportunity to learn about it in such a bigger, I don't know, like global view of life. There's a lot of things, and 9 and 10-year-olds, they're pretty set in their ways. They have a lot to share, but they're also they still love their teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're still willing to try just about anything. And fourth grade was ideal. And those students are near and dear to me, and I'm in touch with many of them as they go on into their adult life as well. So,
I love that I can see how that age group would be just such an ideal age group to teach.
Yep.
Okay, what are the top, this is more for my, future curiosity, top books that a fourth grader reads?
Oh gosh, there's so many great books. So obviously you still have your classic, right? Some of your role dolls. Like, one of the things in education that will never lose power and excitement is read alouds. It doesn't matter what you read, as long as the teacher is reading it aloud, kids are grabbing onto it. But one of the most popular series that ended with at the end of my career in the classroom was a series called The Real McCoys. And by chance, the authors are semi-local to where we are. And so they've been nominated for a Black Eyed Susan Award, which is the big book award in the state of Maryland. And so we ended up being able to buy a copy of the book for the entire school and then bring the authors to the school. And it's a series. So there's 3 books in this series, in The Real McCoy, and it's about a little 4th grade girl who's kind of a detective, and the kids just latch onto her personality and her character. So that book was a hit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hit. Yeah. But we read tons. The One and Only Ivan. There's just, I have to say, children's literature is like never before. It's one of the things I miss most about my classroom, is not being able to have a classroom library. However, in this new job, I have the opportunity of spreading powerful books into the community in a greater capacity. But children's books are just the best way to get about any message across on anything under the sun, no matter the age of the child or the adult, really. So you have a lot to look forward to in reading.
Gabe loves to read, so we read lots of books. He's kind of at the cusp where he could probably start a chapter book, because he listens well, but he really likes to see pictures, and he likes to see what's going on the page. So we're probably a little ways off from being able to start kind of longer books like that. Well, I have to say,
and there was a lot of pushback initially when these first came out, but graphic novels were the way that all my non-readers started to love reading. And even my daughter, who's 10, she's a 5th grader this year, she has been, she plows through a graphic novel in a night. She loves to read. She's an avid reader, and she reads, she read the Harry Potter series over the quarantine part of the pandemic, et cetera. But graphic novels are an incredible way to still have those visual images and capture their attention. Plus, they're written in the way that this new generation of brains work, because they're short and there's lots to look at, and they're apparently also, now that they've been around for a little bit longer with Captain Underpants and Dogman and all those kinds of things that have come out, it is now proven to improve comprehension skills quite significantly, which at first some of the more classic reading gurus weren't big fans, and now everybody is kind of realizing, oh, maybe graphic novels are okay and a great way to get kids reading. So
interesting. Okay,
he might like those. He would probably follow them. There's always a lot of humor in them as well, but they're just great to look at. But there's a lot more depth to the actual writing.
Okay, that's really cool. I don't recall anything like that when I was reading. The thing I remember reading in 4th grade was the Bunnicula series.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that one's... I do know the Bunnicula series. I mean, they've even turned, I was a Babysitter's Club lover, right, back in the day.
Oh, yes.
That was a little bit later, maybe 5th grade. But they've even turned those into graphic novels. They've redone that series into a graphic novel series now that the kids love.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I guess I do have a lot to look forward to.
You do. You have some great books in your future.
I can't wait. Sure. That's great. Gabe has now pulled out all the Curious George books that my husband, whose name is George, has in his stash. So we're plowing through those currently.
That's a great series, though. That's fun.
Yeah. So you were in the classroom for 15 years, but you made a transition recently, 2 years ago. Yes. Tell me more about what you're doing now.
Okay, so by actual title, it doesn't mean a whole lot when I say it out loud, because it's a pretty complex position. But what I am is called the Family Engagement Specialist. And so by law, which unless you're really deeply involved in public education, especially in Title I communities, which is the more than 40% of the school is of low socioeconomic status, you have to have somebody who is working to build capacity of the families in that community. The federal law, Every Student Succeeds Act, actually requires that, Section 1116. So it's part of our federal law, this position. Most counties actually across the country have teams of family engagement family engagement specialists, and the whole purpose is to just build a strong foundation or an intentional and kind of authentic partnership between home and school. So what it looks like a lot is doing professional development for teachers on how to improve that partnership, and then also working with families to become advocates for themselves and their families, and then teaching them better ways to communicate with schools. So it's really building that two-way communication between home and school. So that's kind of what the role is defined. In Queen Anne's County, Maryland, where I work, I'm a one-man team because we are small. So this job has taken on a lot of other pieces and responsibilities and parts and things like that, and all stemming though from working with our local community, right? Working with our families. And so I do a lot of professional development for teachers, and that's actually something I've gotten quite a passion for. Because I guess one of the things that's been greatest about this transition is I used to be able to do things on a very small scope in my classroom, right? I would get my class of 17 to 25 kids. At one point, I was a mindful educator, so we did lots of mindfulness in my classroom, but I was only able to sort of touch those 18 kids in my class at the time. So there were things that I made time for in my own room, in my four walls. I'd close the door, kind of forget about the must-dos and pacing guides and all the things you're supposed to keep up with. And I was able to sort of have an impact and do those things that I found to be really, really important in just growing kind human beings, right? In my classroom. So I started to sort of struggle a little bit with what they, mandated curriculum and things like that. And some of the things that I felt were most important, we were getting less and less time for. So this position, I'm lucky enough to be building it because they did not have it until I got the role 2 years ago in Queen Anne's County. So I was the first family engagement specialist. So I've had a lot of leeway into building as to what this position looks like. And it's been an incredible learning experience for me. It has provided an insane amount of professional growth, and it has reconnected me to some of those things, those reasons that I went into education in the first place, on a scale that almost feels like some days that have come full circle. One of the biggest pieces of this job is in the northern part of our county. It is extremely rural. We are in farm country here on Maryland's eastern shore. Lots of soybean fields and chicken farms. So we get a lot of migrant workers, and a lot of immigrants are in this area. And actually, one of our schools now, in the literally one stoplight town, middle of nowhere, is almost 50% Latino or Latinx. And what is amazing to me, though, of that 50%, 86% of them are from Guatemala.
Oh, really?
So that is the full circle moment that I had. So all these families are coming, and I always, it's amazing how they find this. It's mind-boggling. How in the heck did you find this part of the United States? But yeah, they are from Guatemala. A lot of them are from the indigenous villages in the northern region. Actually, when they come, many of them don't even speak Spanish. They speak they speak Mam and Quiche and some of the indigenous languages. But I was lucky enough, and yeah, sure, I'm 40 now, but so 20 years ago or 22 years ago, I was lucky enough to visit many of their villages, and I have some pretty vivid memories of being in Guatemala. And so that gives me an immediate connection to a lot of these families. Trust is obviously an issue, this world that we live in. especially in the political climate that we've had for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So, setting foot into your child's school, asking questions at the front door, feeling welcome, all of those, like building that welcoming environment is a huge part of my job. Is how do I ensure that every parent, every caregiver who walks into the building feels like they belong.
Regardless of anything else in their background, you're opening
Exactly.
your doors to educate their children.
Right. And they need to know that they have, that sure, we may be the experts in terms of content, but they will always be the first teacher of their child. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they are the expert of their child. And so how, we have to have that partnership. They have to ask questions. And for a lot of my Latino population too, it's been a big work, a big project to work with them on it's okay to ask an educator a question. It's okay to ask questions about your child. It's okay to not be satisfied with everything that the schools provide. You know what I mean? Because they are so grateful for the experience and they value it so much that sometimes they need some just like, hey, it's our, here's a list of questions. When you go to parent-teacher conferences, here's some things that you can ask.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, the full circle moment, I have been working with some just near and dear families. I was lucky enough to be granted a grant through the National Center for Families Learning and through the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium to set up a family learning community in my little elementary school that's over 50% Latinx. And so I have, last year was our first year in this program, and I had 8 families last year enroll, and by the end of the year I had 14. And basically it's a family literacy program. They partner with their teacher, they partner with their child, they spend time in their child's classroom. I spend time doing something called parent time with them, where we work on any personal goals, or we did yoga one day, anything that really speaks to them as the adult. And then there's an adult education piece to help them move forward with their own personal goals, whether it is learning English or some of them are working to get their high school diploma. It's just, some of them want to go to beauty school. Some of them want to start their own business. So we work on all of that. Some of my proudest moments are just like the one lady, she started her own cleaning business over the summer, and we were able to put together her business card, and all of this happens through this program. So it's just it's a real wrap around the entire family. So this year was year 2 of that program. And we are already up to 18 families enrolled, which is tremendous.
That's awesome.
And the best part, we're doing it all virtually.
Wow.
So here is a group of immigrants who have come in. They've received an iPad and a hotspot, and they're learning how to do Google Meets. They're learning how to do Google Classroom and how to check their Gmail. And it's just a very slow, steady process. Mm-hmm. And I'm using my Spanish and learning, it's getting better every day, and they're practicing. We always, we made a deal. They would practice their English with me. I practiced my Spanish with them. But again, people are always like, well, why is it only Latin, the Latin population who's involved in this program? And it's offered to everyone. Everyone receives an invitation. And this is now the second year in a row we've only had our Latino families take advantage of the program. So I think it speaks volumes again as to what is, just the opportunity that it presents them, and how they really value that opportunity.
That's awesome. Are the family members who are attending, I'm just curious, is it more mothers, fathers? Is it a mix?
It's a mix, actually.
Okay.
So we have, this year I have 3 dads who were the ones that came in and are very adamant about being able to help their child learn at home. And, I think even now they're trying to do some of the teaching at home, and obviously they're doing it in English, and which is not their first or sometimes their second language, obviously. And so they're just they're so grateful for anything we provide. Part of this program that kind of grew out of the closure last year in March was, so how can I help these kids continue and these families continue to make progress at home? So we created this thing called the backpack, which Parent and Child Together Time is part of the sort of national program.
Okay.
But we I basically just took a physical backpack and filled it with stuff, puzzles and manipulatives and notebooks and stories and puppets and all these things that these families could do together with their children at home. So now this has continued into this year. So every month they come pick up their backpack full of whatever it may be. This year, this past month, it was all around family. So it had books about family. It had books about traditions. It had books about learning the story of your name. So it's really to help promote conversation at home and to provide some learning experiences that they would otherwise not be able to do so. Because when you ask them, we do a survey when they first become part of it. And a lot of them, you say, are you able to provide your child with any additional learning materials at home? And the answer is, 99% of the time, no. Mm-hmm. These are very multi-generational homes. There's a lot of families, who are, living with 3 or 4 other families. Mm-hmm. And who were hit very, very hard by the pandemic. I mean, this is the population that was still working. And, we had COVID was not kind to many of my families, but still they were the ones who were continuously turning their work in and participating virtually. And it's just amazing to me.
Yeah. So what has happened with the pandemic in these families, and what ways have you had to really adjust with them, or what have you done to really outreach to them?
So again, I talked a little bit before about school being a lifeline, mm-hmm. and this was more apparent than ever. So when we first closed down and people started getting sick, that I spent a lot of time initially trying to educate them on things that they needed to do health-wise. So we have a lot of families who are also illiterate in their native language, right? So how do you share information about health protocol and wearing a mask and washing mm-hmm. your hands, and here's what you do if you get sick, and here's this. So there was a lot of time and phone calls and text messages that they can then read, or just have them read to them on their phones, trying to get that information across. Mm-hmm. Initially just educating them about what was happening. Before, masks were kind of, I don't want to say they weren't a thing, but they weren't, we weren't mandated to wear them. If you remember back in March and April, that sort of came a little bit later. Mm-hmm. And when it did, many of them did not have masks. So I actually had, with the assistance of my aunt's project, the mooncatcher.org, they make reusable pads for children or women in other countries to promote girls staying in school. But they switched it over to making masks, and especially here in the U.S., they made a lot of masks initially during that time for some of our Native American populations and reservations out west who were struggling with having access to that. So she sent me just bunches of material, and I created a sewing cohort of local ladies in this area, and I delivered materials to each of their doorsteps back in April, and then they produced masks, and then we were able to distribute those masks to our immigrant communities and some of the very more rural communities that just didn't know that that's what they needed at the time. Mm-hmm. The other big piece that mainly it was sort of a drop everything and meet basic needs time initially. So we worked, night and day to, collect. A lot of kids, the only time they eat is when they're in school. Yep. So how do we get these school meals back up and running? And is this going to hold you over for the weekend? So I learned more about the food industry than I ever thought I would know. My dear husband ended up helping me lug gallons and gallons and gallons of milk. I reached out to dairy farmers and dairy corporations who I knew were having to throw their milk away. And we were having, 1,200 gallons donated to the county, which then we distributed throughout the community. It was really a big time basic needs focus in the spring and into the summer. Luckily that has shifted some, but again, this past Friday, we get a lot of assistance with the CARES dollars now, and there's money put towards that. But with one of our local resource centers, a couple of teachers and I, we were able to hand out 350 turkeys and all of the fixings for Thanksgiving dinner to our families in that community. And it was great watching them come through. It was just a drive through. They would just come through and we put it in their cars, picking up meals for Thanksgiving. And they're so grateful. So,
That's
that need continues, and we still try and meet those needs. And people are obviously in a little bit better place now because we've all learned so much during this.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mayhem. It was just complete panic. And when you couldn't just go into the school or call the teacher and ask a question, they didn't know who to turn to. I was getting a lot of calls. Where do I go to get tested? Or what do I do about this symptom? And, realizing that schools really, you become the health professional, you become a finance advisor, you become, you take on so many roles as an educator for vulnerable families, because that's where they trust. That's where, they trust you with their children. They're going to trust you with anything.
Yeah, you're right. It's the lifeline.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how did the food distribution work? So you were getting food in, donated.
Yes. So it was twofold. The schools got permission to provide a certain amount of meals, like through their school meal service. But we were concerned about, feeding the whole family at that point. Mm-hmm. So we ended up doing a huge community drive and donation, sort of emergency donations. And it was a humongous success. It was a ton of work, but really we were able to get, all kinds of things. What I ended up doing was writing a community, newsletter email saying, okay, this week my goal, and I would try and pick things that were that went two ways, right? So we would put together simple meals. We would put together simple meals that kids could possibly have to make on their own if their families, adults weren't home, but also something that would feed a lot of kids, right? Or feed a big family.
How smart. Mm-hmm.
So, I would say, okay, this week we're collecting cereal because I knew I would, I knew I was getting a donation of gallons of milk. So I'm collecting cereal, or we're collecting pasta and spaghetti sauce, or we're collecting, one time we had hot dogs, macaroni and cheese. We tried to be also culturally sensitive and culturally aware too. And some of them, we would get the bags of maize and other things we knew that they would need to make tortillas and things that they would ask for that way too. Mm-hmm. So, but what we realized is once we sort of streamlined it and we would put together local grocery store donated paper bags, and we had this huge assembly line operations going on in a couple of the school buildings. We were using the school refrigerators for storage for our milk and some of the other perishable things. And we would put together grocery bags, and families would come in once a week and we would load their cars up with a grocery bag. And a lot of times we were able to get local restaurants and, like Chick-fil-A, for example, would donate 40 Chick-fil-A meals, and they would drive it out to the school. And so the first 40 families that came through got a Chick-fil-A meal and their bag of groceries. So it was like a special treat. As the weather got hotter, we did a lot of ice cream and Rita's Ice. They would donate frozen, little pints of that I could hand out. So it was really the community came together like I've never seen before. And it was we were just moving food constantly. A lot of other things, baby. There was a lot of need for baby gear, diapers and wipes and formula and that kind of thing. So we were able to gather that as well. And then, of course, especially at the middle school, we did a huge drive for feminine products. So a lot of my students rely on school to have access to those too.
Oh, interesting. Is that something that's pretty typical for schools to provide?
Yeah. And
okay.
Well, so yes and no.
Okay.
So school nurse's office have them at the middle school level, and actually some elementary schools. But it's kind of we're still in 2020 and a major shift in that too. There has been some Senate bills put out about mandating that they be available for free in all girls' bathrooms in schools, because it's a kind of a big deal. You have to go down to the nurse. The other thing is, and the nurse's office, they really get like the hospital grade size gigantic pads, which no middle school girl wants to use.
Sure.
And so we kind of have like I call it like the black market, but honestly, they know they can come to my office and I have this huge drawer full of whatever they want, name brand stuff, or things that they want to use, or like the teenage kind that fit their little tiny bodies. or the guidance counselor. There's certain teachers that keep it in their rooms, and they know that they can go there. But knowing that, yeah, there's a lot of kids that really truly rely on school to have access to those. Those are just expensive, and they can't get them at home. Mm-hmm. So those went fast. They were a hot commodity when our families would drive through. And we had, the grocery pickups were on Fridays, and when they would drive through, the family, we would say, does anybody need feminine products? And you'd get a lot of takers, and they would go quickly.
Okay. That is definitely one of the things that I wouldn't have thought of. I mean, it makes total sense.
Mm-hmm. The need for that. And we did, and we tried to do lots of hygiene stuff. Because again, that's mm-hmm. another thing schools provide, and dish soap, and, it was just things that were already hard to get anyway. We would hit the jackpot. I had a couple shoppers, who once we started getting a little bit of like emergency service money through the county, not much, but when they were able to just, purchase toilet paper when it would come on something, we would just buy it, and we would take what we could get, so we could at least throw a couple rolls of toilet paper in the top of their grocery bags. I mean, whatever we could get our hands on that was useful, and, we knew that they were in need of, we would try and get.
So many layers of heroes involved in this process.
It's just, it really is. And it's amazing. And I, again, going back to all those silver linings, just another thing, right? So the middle school principal, for example, had no idea. He's a man, first year principal, no clue that feminine products were even an issue or something that needed to be dealt with at the school. Mm-hmm. Just not in his line of sight.
Sure.
So now totally on board for, why don't we have these available in every bathroom? Well, yeah, this is the kind of conversations, you know what I mean? There's a lot of that type of thing that has come out from this. And just even for educators, a lot of the teachers, they knew their kids struggled at home, but they were more focused on, they come into school tired, they're not getting their work done, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But hey, okay, so now here's a kid who's literally trying to survive day to day and finish all of their work. And, it was very eye-opening for a lot of people. And also a very helpless feeling. We have our hands on. We know when a kid's cold at school, we can go get a winter jacket and figure out how to take care of that situation. But when you're not laying eyes on them, and you're not, it's a very helpless feeling for many, many teachers, because we can't do the things that just kind of naturally occur at school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that lifeline.
Mm-hmm.
So your schools are back virtual again?
They are. We started back with some just small group instruction, and then as of tomorrow, they're back virtual again. Our numbers have skyrocketed, like most of the country, I think. Mm-hmm. But
so are you reverting back to some of the things you put in place previously, or what does that look like going forward?
Some of it will be, there are some things that we will be looking at. A lot of people are still still working. So mm-hmm. some of that dire need is not there yet to that level. We have ensured that we have a Queen Anne's County Christmas Angels and the Adopt-A-Bear program, everything. We've wanted to ensure that all of our students through the 8th grade will have some form of Christmas. Adopt-A-Bear, those kinds of organizations have sort of cut us off at 2nd grade. So it's relied on, again, community people to donate for a very specific list of students from 2nd through 8th grade, a long list of students. So we've been working on that, which is amazing. And we've had some, big, every student this year is getting bedding and warm bedding. Regardless, they're all getting new pillows, they're all getting new comforters and blankets awesome. And things. So in addition to anything that they may or may not have asked for, or, that their interest, we wanted to ensure that everyone had, what they needed to be warm. So awesome. Yeah, there's obviously there's more assistance from the local government. There's more assistance from the school, food services and things, because they've had time to think about it and prepare. So it wasn't, mm-hmm. we were like really in that emergency state of how do we get food home to kids? And so now, they're more prepared that way. So I don't know I'm hoping I won't have to do too much heavy lifting of gallons of milk, but if we do, we will.
Mm-hmm.
This is at least this way we have some systems in place that will ensure that our families are getting what they need.
That's amazing. So if somebody is listening to this and they say, I want to help, or what advice would you give somebody that wants to support their local community? Maybe it's their educators, maybe it's the migrant families, maybe it's another vulnerable person or population within their community. What would you advise somebody?
That's a loaded question. There's a lot there. No. So reach out to your school systems, right? Reach out to your community school. I guarantee they need something. I guarantee there is something. The other thing that I know, if you have local shelters, local food banks, all of those things, reach out to them too, and ask them to be specific. What I found in doing all this, especially with food, is that, it was you get a lot of food drives where people go into their pantries and they just grab what they're not eating and then they take it, and then but like really thinking through, okay, what will feed a family of 5? What's an easy peanut butter and jelly sandwiches go a long way for a long time. But, calling and offering or going into one of those local places and saying, how can I help? I think what I have found is like you make, obviously you make a connection with 1 or 2 people and you feel like, okay, you feel whole again. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something the other thing is, there's so much to be said, and this is kind of a bigger piece in all of this, right? So challenge things that you see are wrong, right? Be a voice for people who don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of local agencies across the country that work with our immigrant and our migrant populations, especially our immigrant youth, who may be in dire need of something more than ever right now. But again, it's just sort of stepping out of your comfort zone and making that phone call and reaching out and checking in. And even if you call your local school, chances are they can point you to an organization or a group that may need some assistance, whether financially or through manpower or whatnot. But I think that it's just so important to get out of our own personal box right now. Everybody's uncertain, everybody's unsettled. This feels chaotic to all of us. And what I have found, and as I've said throughout this conversation, right, is finding those silver lining pieces, is having to get out of my own world and realizing, okay, I'm pretty lucky to be stuck in the house with my family and have a backyard to go out and play in, and food on our table, all these things. And so, it's helped me not to fall into that, oh, I'm so miserable trap, by going out and doing all these other things too.
Mm-hmm.
So just, kind of getting out of your box, getting out of your comfort zone just a little bit. Now's a really, really good time for that.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And the cases are rising and it's getting cold and there's still a lot of unknowns right now. And
yep. And so I think, like you say, right, the whole idea behind this is that the Illuminate piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how important it is to go be that bright light, be that, somewhere. And I always say, right, the sun will rise and we'll try again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's, what I've really tried to reiterate to my families too. I've done a lot of send a lot of video messages through social media and other outlets to get positive messages out into the community. Most recently, last week, I put together a video I called Reboot, and it was sort of like, okay, we know we're going into virtual learning, and we know this feels just completely a mess again. And but guess what, right? We learn from mistakes. You can get up, you can start your routine all over again the next day. Routines are meant to fall apart. There's just, it's that whole idea of trying again. And so helping, like, even your neighbors or your girlfriend or whoever calls, it's just getting that message of, okay, let's, tomorrow the sun will rise and we can try it again.
I love that. Amanda, you are illuminating in so many ways. I mean, you really are one of the heroes of this pandemic in what you're doing in your community and how you're making these connections. And I'm really grateful that you've shared that with me today.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for giving me a platform to talk about it and hopefully inspire others to do more of that too.
Absolutely. And the sun will rise.
That's right.
I
sun
love
will
that.
rise, and we'll try again.
Yeah. So we have a couple end of podcast questions that I'd love to ask you.
Okay.
So obviously you are somebody that is illuminating in your community and your family. Who's somebody that illuminates for you?
Okay. Wow. So we can go like large scale. And I think of, like most of the world, right? RBG and how much she's left for, I recently watched the movie with my two girls raising daughters, and she speaks directly to me and to them. So, on the basis of sex, we watched that recently, and it was just the conversations and questions that they have. And, that has obviously, she will always and forever be somebody that speaks directly to me. But to think of it more of kind of on a personal level. So I refer to, I adore both of my daughters, but I refer to my 10-year-old as, we always sing, "Here Comes the Sun." She's the sunshine. And I was thinking about this weekend, actually, I watched her play soccer, and she is just one of the most incredible teammates I will ever see. I am one of the most competitive people in the world. And she is just so kind. She is such a kind soul. Is everybody's great job. You did such a great job. And people will say, gosh, she brings so much light and joy. She got the Sunshine Award in her 4th grade class and things like that. So she really is, as we were giggling at the dinner table tonight, she really does bring a whole lot of light to some pretty dark days. So I have to, sometimes when you're the younger sister, you don't get a lot of credit for things, but she truly illuminates in my life for sure.
And knowing that little one, she really, I can attest to that she is truly sunshine.
She is. She definitely is. She's a pretty amazing kid.
From a pretty amazing mom. So it makes sense.
We're trying to raise them, right? Strong women raise strong daughters.
You're raising some amazingly strong women for sure. Now, you've given some great 4th grade book recommendations, but do you have any other? We always ask our guests to give one book recommendation.
Okay, so I'm going, one of my other sort of side projects, I am working on a lot of anti-racism professional development for teachers during this critical time, just in a world where kids don't have the chance to come into school and talk about social injustice and have a platform for these conversations. So I've been doing a lot of reading in that genre. And I know I mentioned before, children's books, really, honestly, I feel like if you ever need to teach a lesson, find a children's book to match. It's there, and they're so brilliant. But one of the other books I've been reading a lot of are the young adult books. And what I have found, especially in regard to the topic of anti-racism, they speak to my soul. They are just, so I want to recommend a book called All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley or Kiley. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, the last name. But it just basically, it is written from the perspective of two teenagers in a community where there is an issue between a black boy and a white police officer. And it goes back and forth from their perspectives, and it just really challenges systemic racism, and it really talks about the impact of community turmoil on all members of the community. And so it'll make you cry. It is a powerful book, but so easy to follow. I also would recommend listening to it on Audible or listening to the audio version, because they do a great job of going back and forth between the characters, and you really start to connect with the two of them. So that would be on my sort of top of my list right now.
That's awesome. That's a great recommendation, and obviously really important for us to be reading now. And I love that you're bringing that into your family engagement piece.
It's so important. It's so important, especially living in this very white rural community that I live in. But these conversations have to happen. But honestly, too, as an adult, how much I need to learn and how much more self-awareness I need to have in this, not racist versus anti-racist world we need to start adapting to. But this book, you won't be able to put it down. It's just a great story that encompasses all those lessons.
Awesome. I can't wait to read that. And my last question for you is, what is your message for the world?
I'm going to go with my, the sun will rise and we will try again, right? So it's so important to remember that, we can do this. Every day is a different day. Every day is a new day. And we'll try again.
Thank you so much, Amanda. What a perfect episode for this Thanksgiving week. Because it is Thanksgiving this week in the U.S., we just want to share our gratitude with you all for supporting the podcast throughout this year, and we hope that these episodes have left you inspired and with your own thankfulness. For those of you who are celebrating, we wish you a happy and safe Thanksgiving this year.